Welcome. My name is Sid Ahmed Ben Rawan, and I am the co-author of the book that we will be talking about today with my friend, mentor, and co-author, James Harrington. We are very excited to be with you in this session to give you some insights on this new book and walk you through the different chapters, the different examples, and the different practices that we discuss in some length to help you understand the standard, but perhaps more importantly, develop some competencies and capabilities on how you can manage innovation. Before I start, let me just make a couple of comments. The first one is that both Jim and myself have been heavily involved in the development, the writing, and the publication of the new standard ISO 56002 Innovation Management System. We were among 15 maybe delegations from 15 countries, and each country had about 5 to 7 experts on innovation management. And we had many meetings. And during these meetings, we try to come up with an ideal framework that would apply to many organizations, big organizations, SMEs, small and medium organizations, and startups as well. The goal was primarily to help managers and business leaders think about innovation management and what would be the best framework that would work to incentivize entrepreneurs and innovators to engage with the innovation management. So we wanted to give you some insights on how this process went. We wanted to share with you some lessons learned from our talk and our discussions with other groups and other experts as well. As you may know, Jim was leading working group 2 in TC 279 on behalf of the US group, US TAG. And group 2 was in charge of innovation assessment. And myself was leading group 1 as part of the innovation management system US TAG, ISO TC 279, which focused primarily on the innovation management system. The second comment that I wanted to talk about before we start getting into the details of the book is that the standard 56002 innovation management system is not about regulating or codifying innovation. It's primarily about managing innovation. There is a huge difference between managing innovation and creating a standard that codify innovation activity. We certainly do not want to suggest that you create a standard to regulate or to codify innovation activities and creative thinking, but rather you would want perhaps to think about best ways and best practices to manage the system that will allow you to produce innovation outcome, to produce innovation activities, and to produce innovation product and services. The third comment I wanted to share with you is that innovation management 56002, it's a guidance standard. And in the language of ISO, that means it's simply a framework that is suggested to people. They can make reference to it. If you have a strong, mature innovation management system that produces results, that's totally fine. If you don't have one, and if you're struggling on building one, and you're trying to figure out what other people are doing, then the standard and our book would be perhaps your first stop. It gives you an idea about the work of ISO. It gives you a good advice and good recommendations on how innovation management system should be looked at. One of the great things that I like about ISO is this quote that you see on the top of my screen, which is a quote that I took from the website of ISO, which says, great things happen when the world agrees. So a standard, it's simply a framework that standardize our languages, that standardize terminology, that makes us agree on certain basic concepts. So we are able to produce the beautiful things that we produce. One of the things that I wanted to share prior to discussing the book is that the innovation management standard that ISO produced in 2019, which is again called 56002 Innovation Management System, is part of an innovation family, ISO innovation family. I think there are about 8 standards that are either in the working or have been produced or will be produced in the future. And all these standards are looked at as supporting standard to innovation management. So you have one standard that focus particularly on terminologies and vocabulary. If you are struggling on what innovation means, what innovation management means, what assessment means, what entity means, what a product, innovative product means, you got a very good reference, which is the ISO 5600, which was produced or published in 2020, and that gives you a very good definitions about these vocabularies. Then you've got another standard that focuses on partnership. You've got another standard that focuses on innovation management assessment. And here also I needed to mention that both Jim and I are working on another book that hopefully we will publish in a year or two that focuses primarily on assessment. How do you assess innovation management system? What are the steps that you need to go through? What are the questions that you have to ask? What are the metrics that you have to use to be able to assess an innovation management system? Then you've got another standard that focus on IP issues, intellectual property, another one that focus on a strategic intelligence management, and then another one that focus on idea management, and another one that focus specifically on measuring operations with respect to innovation. So all these standards are part of the innovation family. And if you're not familiar with them, I strongly suggest that you take a look at them. Of course, the most important one is the one that we will be talking about today, and the one around which we developed the book, Jim and myself, to give you an idea not only about this innovation management standard, but also about its recommendation and best practices. The first thing I wanted to share with you is that in the book, what we did, we followed the same template as the standard. So we did not want to confuse you, to confuse the reader on how to make connections between the clause or the statement of a standard and what you find in our book. So we tried to make it easy for you. So when you are reading our book, as if you are reading the standard itself, and you are developing the best practices. Of course, you need to read the standard. You will not be able to understand the book unless you have bought and you have written and you have read the standard, and you will not be able actually to develop those practices unless you have understood and you have read well the standard. The book, it's simply a guidance, it's simply an explanation of how, in our own views, the views of James Harrington and Sid Ahmed bin Rawan, how the book or how the clause should be interpreted. So you will find a lot of findings, you will find a lot of research, you will find best practices, you will find some trends, and you will find some tips on how you can read, how you can implement the standard. So when you look at the standard, there are a couple of comments that I wanted to make. There are about 10 sections in this standard and roughly about 1,100 lines. And this standard follow the same high level structure as ISO 9000 family standard. It's the same approach. It's the same template. So you will find a section that talk about introduction. You will find a section that talk about context, a section that talk about leadership, a section that talks about planning, another one about support, another one about operations, another one about performance evaluation, and finally, another one about improvement. So what we did in the book is explain to you in some detail these different sections and these different statements and these different clauses. And we added, of course, best practices, some trends, some research, and some finding. So the first section, which is the introduction of the standard, talks about two important concepts. And we explained in the book these concepts. The first concept is obviously the PDCA cycle that you are quite familiar with. I am not going to get into details about the cycle because this is something that most of people who are involved in quality or business excellence or innovation knows it and knows it well. However, the section one introduction brings a new thing that we have not seen prior to this standard, which talks about the principles of innovation. And this is something that is critical to establish an innovation management system. I like very much what my co-author and my friend Jim talks about when he talks about this section. He always likes to say that principles are not negotiable. You do not negotiate these principles. And if you and your team have some differences about these principles, then there is a problem with your understanding to innovation. A team should have the same understanding of all these principles. They all should believe in, they all should buy into these principles, and they all should adopt these principles. Innovation management system will not work, will not be effective, will not be efficient, will not achieve goals if these principles or one of these principles is missing, or worse, sometimes that people have different interpretation of these principles. So in the book, we explain these principles, we provide some examples, and we show you how you can implement these principles and how you can get your team, your business leadership, your senior leadership, and your entrepreneurs believe and buy into these principles. Let me just mention a couple of them. I'm going to start with the second one on my slide, which is a future-focused leadership. One of the most important principles that the standard talks about is that a successful management, innovation management system is the one that has leadership that is focused on the future. And that makes sense. Innovation is about the future. Innovation is not about the past. Innovation is not about the present. Innovation is not about your success stories that you have told in the past. If you want to stay competitive, if you want to stay relevant to the market, then you need to look into the future. And if you cannot project yourself and project the organization and project your team members and your innovators into the future, then most likely you will not be able to achieve the goals that you are trying to achieve from the innovation management system. And that's what we mean by a principle that is not negotiable. You have to establish this principle. You have to make people believe in it, and you have to make the senior leadership buy into it. Let me give you another example: culture. Innovation is not about processes. Innovation is not about a set of practices. Innovation actually is a cultural practice. It's a mindset. It's a thinking. It's a way of looking at things and a way of doing things. And if you are not able to impact people's practices, if you are not able to impact people's belief and people's value system, then you are missing one of the most important principles. And in the book, we show you how you can engage people and how you can incentivize people and how you can change people's mind set. Then another example I wanted to share with you, which is the management of uncertainty. Innovation, by definition, is managing uncertainty. You do not innovate and you do not need to innovate if everything is all set for you. If you know that tomorrow you are going to be as successful as you have been in the past, then why would you waste your time and invest money and effort in building an innovation management system? The problem is that market change, um, people, customers change, employees change, the global context change. And of course, you need to develop skills and competencies that allow you to be able to manage uncertainty, what you will be making of the future. And that's the heart of innovation. You're not going to guarantee your success or the success of the past into the future. And finally, I'll use one final example, which is adaptability. And that's a critical a principle. Your team has to believe in this concept. We call it adaptability, but a more current concept we talk about is agility. If the organization has not developed some agile practices or some agile mindset, then most likely you will not be able to achieve the goals and to achieve the objectives of the innovation management system. So section one gives you these ideas, and in the book we provide examples and we provide thoughts and best ways of interpreting these principles and how you can connect them directly to your team. Let me give you actually another example, which is something that comes directly from the book with respect to these principles. How do you know that your management innovation system has achieved results and has what we call the value realization? One of the principles that we talk about also in the standard talk about is, of course, the value realization. So how do you know that your company focuses on innovation and on value realization? Well, we'll give you a checklist. So you ask yourself and you ask your team, have we defined a clear process to capture customer insights, and what technology have we adopted or deployed to engage with our customer? What other market research tools and or analytics are being deployed to engage with customer? Do marketing and R&D share information about customer insights? Have we exploited or incited and understood our customer emotion, needs, and changing identities? To what extent have we involved users and other stakeholders in developing, testing, and experimenting with new product and prototype? When you answer those questions, then you realize whether your innovation management system achieves value and realize value or not. And those are very, very good questions that you can use to assess whether the value realization as an important principle of the standard is being implemented, is being understood, is being deployed, and is being captured in the same way you want people to understand it and to implement it. In section four, we talk about the context of the organization. Of course, as I said, we talk about the same thing that the standard talks about. And if you open and if you read the standard 56002, you will find that there are a lot of information that focuses on the context of the organization. And the goal is simply to understand the surrounding of the organization. In other words, you will not be able to have a viable innovation management system if you have not understood, if you have not conducted an analysis that will allow you to understand your industry, to understand the economy, the economic sector in which you operate, to understand the global connection, to understand the connection with different associations and professional groups and customers. So analyzing the context is the first step according to the standard that will allow you to understand the importance of innovation management system, but more importantly, how you can put together an innovation management system. So in the book, we provide you with many, many tools. We did a lit review of what tools and what models are being used when people engage in the analysis of the context of the organization. And we picked a few. One of them is the foresight model, which uses the tool of steeple model, in which you analyze the social, economic, environment, political, and technology implications and impact. Another model we used also is the model developed by James Harrington, which talks about the cultural change model. So these are models that we have offered to you in the book, so you are able to use them to implement the standard. You don't have to spend like days and months and weeks researching how you can analyze the context of the organization. You can find all that information already in the book. And that section talks again about the context of the organization, how you can understand the needs and the expectation of the interested party. The interested party, it's simply the different stakeholders that are engaged with you, and then how you can define and determine the scope of the innovation management system before even you start putting it together. Then comes section 5, which is the section on leadership. And the section on leadership in the standard is a critical section because it has the most important stuff that needs to happen in an innovation management. It talks about the commitment of leadership. It talks about how important for you to focus on value realization. And I just talked about a couple of slides ago about the value of realization and how you can use our checklist to understand whether your innovation management system focuses on value realization or not. It talks about innovation vision. What's the vision of senior leadership and top leadership with respect to innovation? It talks about innovation strategies, and then it talks also about how you are going to communicate the innovation policies. So what we did in the book, we explained this section, and we gave you a specific example on selected items, because the section, I think it has more than 20 statements or 20 clauses. It has more than 4 pages, about 3 to 4 pages, and we did not want you to read all of it. So we gave you probably the most important ones, and we gave you examples as well. So for instance, we gave you some examples on what we call leadership behavior that enhance innovation. What are the things that managers and senior leadership have to do in order to be able to enhance innovation and to entice innovative behavior? I'll give you examples. And this is again a summary of the lit review that we have conducted and the studies that we looked at, the trends that we looked at in the market, some of the best practices, some of the framework that are out there, and we wanted to make that a job easy for you. So when you read the book, you will find directly what other people are talking about. Establishing a trust is very important as a leadership behavior. Do you have that leadership behavior or not? Does your leadership create an environment in which you can trust innovators, you can trust disruptors, you can trust managers, you can trust employees to come up with new and breakthrough idea? Do your senior management challenge the status quo, or they are simply replicating the past experience? Do your leadership, senior leadership, respond in a fast way to a change and how good and how fast they can pivot from one project to another project, from one direction to another direction. That's a measurement. That's an important measurement that gives you an idea about whether your senior leadership is committed to innovation or not. Data-driven and fact-oriented decision making. Are your leadership using data to make decisions and using facts to make decisions so they are able to understand how innovation can affect the future? Do they value the teamwork? Do they value diversity? And are they experts in what they are doing? So these are some examples of what we call leadership behavior that create or enhance the innovation management system. And we gave you a full list of it. We also talked about the value realization, and more importantly, we talked about the vision and the strategy. Let me give you an example here of a checklist that you can run in your own company from day one to check whether and to assess whether your leadership has the capability to lead innovation and to motivate innovators. Example, what actions or steps our top leadership has been involved with to define innovation and develop common language and framework around innovation? Well, if your leadership has not done that, then most likely you are missing a big part of the innovation management system. And the standard talks about that. But what we do in the book, we give you examples and we explain it to you. Have we defined the level of leadership that owns innovation strategy? Who owns strategy at the organization level? Is it senior leadership? Is it middle management? Is lower management? To what extent is our top leadership engaged in leading our innovation portfolio? Who's in charge of the innovation portfolio? Who defines the innovation portfolios? Who makes the breakdown in terms of innovation portfolio? So if your leadership is not doing that, then most likely you're missing leadership behavior that motivate, entice, enhance innovation management system. In the book also, we explain to you the types of innovation strategy. The standard does not tell you what type of strategy you need to have. It simply recommends that you need to have a vision, you need to have a statement about your innovation strategy, and you need to have a strategy. But what type of strategy you're going to have? Well, you go to the book and you will find the type of innovation that we have explained. I'm not going to get into a lot of details because it's a very lengthy explanation. I'm going just roughly to give you an idea about the type of innovation strategies usually we have in the field of innovation. Usually, most of companies, they have what we call incremental innovation. Incremental innovation, we call it baby step innovation. These are small addition or small additional values that are innovative, that enhance the product. A good example that we use is the difference between iPhone 11 and iPhone 7, or iPhone 7 and iPhone 5. It's the same product, but it has some new enhancement, incremental enhancement that makes the product more innovative. Most of companies, they tend to engage with incremental innovation. Then you've got the breakthrough innovation, the disruptive innovation, and the transformational innovation. These are important concepts that you need to understand, your senior leadership needs to understand, and more importantly, your team engaged in innovation has to understand. Here's an example that comes directly from the book on how you can understand, or you can help your team understand innovation strategies. We also make another model that talks about innovation strategy with respect to impact and with respect to technology newness. How new or how novel is the technology? And from that perspective, you can have what we call, again, the disruptive innovation, architectural innovation, incremental innovation, and radical innovation. This is another model different from the one I just explained slide ago. And we're giving this to you so you can understand and your team can have a good control of the concepts and the terminology. But a good example that you can find, it's a checklist that you can run in your team to gauge their understanding of the innovation. 5 questions to ask to test your vision of innovation. Have we clearly articulated our vision, and have we defined our aspiration and intent? If you have not done that, then most likely you still have not decided, or you still have not articulated an innovation strategy. What do we want to be in the future, and how should we challenge the status quo? To what extent has the vision been communicated to all the stakeholders internally and externally? That's very, very important. If your employees do not know about your innovation vision, then most likely you still don't have an innovation vision. You simply have it in your mind, or you have it in your documentation, and that's something that will not allow you to have an efficient and an effective innovation management system. Then we move to the next section, which is the section on planning. And in the planning, of course, is about the a process that will allow you to roll out that strategy and to implement the strategy. So basically the plan that you have in mind that will put all these things together in a nice framework, and you are able to roll it out in your organization so everybody knows about innovation management system and what you mean by innovation management system. So in the book, we provide you with a lot of examples of types of planning. And one of the things that we talk about is something that you have to clearly identify from day one, which is how are you going to achieve your innovation goals? Are you going to focus and to rely on internal growth, meaning your own capability, or you are going to engage in some sort of mergers and acquisition? And the standard gives you this option. The standard gives you this type of choices, but how you implement them, what you make out of them, that's something that we explain and we help you with in the standard. For instance, if you are engaging in mergers and acquisition, what type of acquisition you are thinking about? Is it a horizontal acquisition, vertical acquisition, related acquisition? And those are concepts that we explain in the book. It's also important that a part of the planning that you have to decide about the organizational structure. Where do you want the team that is in charge of innovation to be? Is it going to be at the top? Is it going to be an independent unit? Is it going to be an ambidextrous organization? Is it going to be centralized? Is it going to be decentralized? All these are questions that you have to address prior to putting together the innovation management system. And the standard gives you all these options, but how you implement them, what you will make out of them, you can find answers to that in the book. And then finally, in the planning section, the standard talks about the innovation portfolio, and the portfolio, it's something that you need, you must have. And in the portfolio, it's important that you align the portfolio with the overall strategy of the organization. But also we are helping you to decide about the type of innovation. Remember when I was talking about incremental innovation, disruptive innovation, breakthrough innovation, and transformational innovation? What's the percentage of project that you needed to have in your portfolio at any given time of the year? Well, we suggest as a best practice, as most of people do in world-class organization, leading organization, that you would want to have at least about 70% of your project portfolio put into the incremental innovation, about maybe 20% into the breakthrough innovation, and about 10% into the transformational innovation. And we explain to you why we suggest this rule of 70, 20, 10, and what's the argument and the rationale behind that. Then we move to the next section, and the next section is the support section, which is the standard. By the way, this is the longest standard, the longest section that you have in the standard. If you are going to read this section, you need to have a lot of time to focus on it, because basically it has everything. It talks about people, it talks about time, it talks about knowledge, it talks about funding, it talks about a lot of other things. We picked only these four elements so we can explain them to you. But perhaps the most important thing I got from Jim, and I learned from Jim, is that innovation is not a process. Innovation is an attitude of self-fulfillment. This is a quote that you will see and you will find in our book. Jim likes to say, as much as we would like to think of innovation as a process, in truth, it is not. It is actually an attitude of self-fulfillment. And how do you create an attitude? How do you create a behavior? How do you motivate people to adopt that attitude or that behavior? Well, you look at what you have in the support. What do you do to empower innovators? What do you do to encourage entrepreneurs? What do you do to lure smart people into your organization? What are the things that you create to create a buzz inside the organization? How do you compensate innovators? How do you compensate the top 2 or the top 5 innovators? How do you choose your people? How do you get them to believe in your values? These are the stuff that you needed to do, and we give you some very, very good example in the book. Time, the time that you needed to set for innovative activities. Is innovation simply part of the everyday job that you do between 9 to 5, and you answer the phone and you fill out a form and you address an employee and you talk about and you meet with this client, and then you think about innovation? Or you have some dedication in terms of time and effort to innovation? Well, we argue in the book that innovation needs time, and those who are working on breakthrough solutions, they need to have that time, they need to have that freedom, they need to have that independence and away from the distractions that you have in the organization. Then, of course, knowledge. When we talk about knowledge, what are the type of knowledge that you need? And we explain in the book the difference between tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge, and how you can link these definitions to another standard that ISO has, which is knowledge management standard, which again explains to you how you can deploy different ideas. And then, of course, we talk about funding, and we give you examples. We give you examples and quotes from Steve Jobs, who said once that innovation has nothing to do with funding. And I think he gives an example between Apple and other leading organization in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and how Apple was focusing on innovative product while other organizations were spending and pushing money down to innovation pipeline. So we address this issue of funding. Yes, you don't have to have a big budget. You don't have to have a huge budget, but still you need to have a budget for innovators that is going to help them, that is going to motivate them, and is going to provide them with the resources that they need. In section 8, it's operation. And I would say this is the heart of the standard. This is basically the innovation process. How do you manage innovation? How do you manage ideas in your organization? How do you come up with a product? How do you create concept? How do you deploy a concept? And the standard explains these very, very well. But in the book, we add more examples. We give you some best practices on how you can identify the opportunity. You always start with how you can take an advantage of challenge, of difficulty, of need, or how you can think of that as an opportunity for your organization to develop a new product. Then, of course, you create the concept, you validate the concept internally, and then you develop the solution and you deploy the solution. This is basically the framework that the standard talks about. If you can see in the middle, that's the heart of innovation activities. You start with an opportunity, you start with a challenge, you start with an intent that you want to engage in an innovation, and you end up with achieving and realizing values. In between is, of course, the process that allows you to identify the opportunity, to create the concept, to validate the concept, to develop the solution, and to deploy the solution. An important mention that we talk about in the book is that these different steps, these 5 steps, are not linear. They are iterative, meaning you don't start from 1 and you end necessarily in 5. You can go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and you go back to 1 and you go back to 2 and you go back to 3. It's this iteration that makes your innovation management system a rich one and an agile one. Another important concept also we talk about, or another idea we talk about in the book is, of course, the need to link these different steps with other processes. These steps, they are not thought of or they are not implemented independently of what's happening in the organization. So always, for instance, if you are in step 2, which is creating the concept, or in step 1, identifying the opportunity, you need to go back to your sales process. You need to go back to your customer experience department or process. Maybe you've got some data, maybe you've got some ideas that you need to use to validate that concept. You don't simply validate the concept in the lab or in the department in which the innovation team works, but you needed to connect that validation with the data that you have in the customer service, in the sales, in the production, in the other department. And that's what we mean by the iterative process, but also the agile process, that the process can actually link and can talk and can connect with other processes in the organization as well. We provide you with a checklist to assess an idea. How do you know that an idea is a good idea or it's an innovative idea? And then we give you 5 questions that you have to ask yourself, and you rank them from 1 to 5. This is something that is very easy. You can implement. You don't have to spend days and months to find such a tool. Then we come to section 9. In section 9, the standard talks about performance evaluation. In the book, we explain to you that it's important for you to have metrics. As all we know, metrics drive behavior, and without any metrics, without any incentives, people will not engage with the system. So there must be some sort of metrics. Now, the metrics that you needed to choose should be your own metrics. It's okay to borrow other metrics, but once you choose your metrics, then measure what you are trying to measure. And one of the things that Jim and I have found in a lot of organizations, that sometimes organizations, they get lost in metrics, and they get lost in measurement, and they get lost in a lot of KPIs, and that takes them away from the essence of the management system, which is the innovativeness that is supposed to happen. We explained to you these metrics, and we followed the same template that the standard talks about. The standard talks about 3 types of metrics: input-related indicators, output-related indicators, and throughput-related indicators. And we give you a list of those indicators, so you pick and you choose the ones that matches your activity and matches the team that you are working with. In addition to explaining all these clauses and all these statements and enrich them with our own views and our own experience, and with data, research, finding, and best practice and frameworks from world-class organizations. You also will find in the book at the very end a few pragmatic and useful things. You will find, for instance, a glossary that has more than 300 concept and terminology that relate to innovation. This is courtesy of Jim, who put this based on his own experience and previous publications, and he wanted you as a reader to benefit from that. So if you have a question about what do we mean by absence thinking, what do we mean by abstract rules, what do we mean by abundance and redundancy, what do we mean by innovation, what do we mean by administrative process, and you are new to that, you just go to the appendix A and you will find all these definitions. We also added all the useful tools that you can find, and this is also in Appendix B, courtesy of Jim. And then in Appendix D, we added all the standard. We just named them for you, so it's easy to find them on the ISO store. If you want to buy them, you don't have to get confused. When was this standard published? What is it about? Is it about IP? Is it about strategy? Is it about this, about assessment? So you find the list of all the ISO family standard with their numbers and with their date of publications. And that's something that saves you a lot of time. And of course, most importantly, in Appendix C, you will find the philosophy of James Harrington, how he sees innovation and his experience over the years, more than 50 years. You will read about it in a small paragraph, how he looks at the world and what he believes is important for your organization. I suggest that you take a look at this, but read it when you are relaxed, when you want to enjoy a piece of reading. It's very, very motivating to read and very enriching as well. Of course, this was the book. This was the things that we wanted you to learn about the book. There is something that we wanted you also to learn about us. Both James and myself are involved in the Harrington Management System company. This is the company that James has created over the years, and we do many, many things. So we can help you to conduct training about innovation or about other things. If you go to our website, you will find a lot of product and a lot of things that we do. In training, we have more than 300 courses that we can provide, but we can focus on innovation since we're talking about innovation. We also do certification, and we can get you the medal that we have in the Harrington Management System. We also do consulting, and we also provide research center about many, many things that have been published in the world of business excellence and innovation. We use the time methodology. This is the methodology that James has published over the years. And we have published also a book about it, I believe in 2019. It's called Time. And now it's being translated into many, many other languages. So we use that methodology to provide those services that you are looking at in the website or in this slide: the training, certification, consulting, research, and of course, other services as well. I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. It's an honor for me that I have worked for the last 4 years on this book, and it's an honor for me that I have worked on this standard. Both Jim and I are here to help you understand the standard implemented in your own organization. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to talk to us. We hope that you are going to acquire the book, that you are going to buy the book. This is something that we believe will help you and will explain to you many, many things. It will help you to benefit from the experience of the two members who have been involved in the standard. It will give you some insights, and this will save you a lot of time and a lot of effort on how you can implement the standard. Again, thank you very much, and I shall see you online.